what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today Blizzard has finally released and given, I guess, a bit of a deep dive on what patch 9.12, being dubbed as Eternity's End, actually is. Taking a look at the new zones, the new raid, and after the actual, I guess, video they released ended, there was a handful of interviews that came out across varying websites that talked a bit more about Legendaries and Covenants and Renown and tier sets and all that. Most of the questions we wanted to be answered were actually answered today. So in this video, the first half is going to be, I guess, a bit of a reaction to the actual video they put out, looking at the new zones, the new raids, all that kind of stuff. And then I want to cover the actual tier sets, Legendaries, Renown levels, new zones, the raid, the gating of the raid, basically all the relevant points from a PvE end of the spectrum, and talk about how I feel about them. Good, if they're good, they're bad, whatever, what have you. So not a whole lot here. If you want to watch the stream, feel free, there's a link down below. Swing by anytime to hang out. I stream 5 to 6 days a week. With that being said, let's get into the first part, being the reaction, and then I'll place timestamps to separate the reaction and the actual, I guess, discussion of the new systems. Some are pretty much everything today I was very happy with, except for one thing. Let's see it.
The Shadowlands story pulls together threads that started in Warcraft 3 and wove their way through many of our expansions. We approached it like a drama in 3 acts. Now, as the third and final act begins of the saga, we need to stop the jailer from reaching his ultimate goal, which is to rewrite the rules of reality. Eternity's End serves as the final chapter of one book of the Warcraft saga. The jailer has the advantage. He has seized the sigils of the leaders of the 4 covenants.
We see Sylvanas realize that she's been a pawn in the jailer's game this entire time, and she refuses to serve him, and she's taken prisoner.
The jailer is able to open a portal to who knows where, taking Anduin with him.
And the Primus had us take some time to retrieve some new sigils.
Now we have gathered our forces. We are working with the Primus to open our own gateway to pursue the jailer to this realm unlike any we've seen before.
All right. Yeah, okay. All right, okay. This is what
the Primus opens a portal, and we come into this alien land. It's completely white, foggy. We're walking on water for some reason.
They can only make out some shapes, some figures there, some crazy devices and consoles.
Eventually, you make your way to a giant gate, and behind it lies Zereth Mortis.
All right.
Zereth Mortis was created by the first ones, and it is intended to create afterlives.
Think of it as being tucked away in the fabric of the Shadowlands itself. It's kind of the behind the scenes of these afterlives that we've journeyed
to. Dude, that looks so cool.
It's the land where the progenitors, the first ones who created all of the realms of the Shadowlands, this is their workshop.
They've created everything we've experienced in Azeroth and Shadowlands, and even realms we haven't discovered yet.
These first ones built the universe, as far as we know, but their intentions or methods are completely unknown.
But of course, the jailer's presence here is disrupting this process, and we're working to push back against the jailer's forces and protect this place.
I think the artists have done a fantastic job, and I know they did a lot of research, and they looked at a lot of real-life examples of very strange places in the real world.
As a team, we were really trying to make this place as alien as possible. So we really wanted to make everything feel completely unique and completely different. Our trees here are floating. We have stones that are floating. We even have the massive Forge of Afterlives that is floating in the center of the zone.
And true to its name, it's something that is kind of putting together a new afterlife to be sent out into the Shadowlands.
We have this water all around you because water is really the catalyst for any kind of creation.
It's actually unlike any other water that we've seen before. This is actually water that we can walk on. It almost creates like a threshold between Zereth Mortis and some other kind of more primordial space right below it. Everything you see in Zereth Mortis has a purpose and intention behind it. For us, it was really important to find ways to convey that intention in the environment itself. And one of the ways in which we did it was through this duality between a lush and a dry biome. In the dry biome, we see perhaps what the original look of the zone was when the progenitors were first establishing this workspace for themselves. And in the lush biome, we see the result of their experimentation with plant life and fauna and things like that.
These are all test beds for what we'll eventually see elsewhere.
From there, we started thinking about what kinds of creatures would be in this place that are fundamentally prototypes. There's terraforming here. There's creatures that are building afterlives. We tried to really stretch and think what that might be like.
Okay, that's not a mount. I don't know
My
what to tell you,
personal
dude.
favorite includes the giant armored snail, and we also have a progenitor chicken, which answers the question of what came first.
These first ones who crafted Zereth Mortis, what they left behind were the Automa, meant to take care of the place and make sure that it fulfilled its function to create afterlives.
The Automa have several different classes, and you can see this in their silhouettes. We have the builders, we have the protectors, we have the casters, and each one of them have a specific role within the Shadowlands. And then you'll also discover the Jiro, which are a part of the Automa. They're a little more quirky, they have a little more personality. They are a little more sentient than the other Automa, so some of them even split off to pursue their own desires.
Unfortunately, when we found our way in, Devourers also found their way in. They are ravenous.
They're consuming this weird energy, and it's causing them to mutate and to fall apart.
Cool.
And the Automa, where they are confronted by them, some of them are fighting them off.
And so it's going to take some time for them to understand that we're here trying to help them drive out this threat.
Dailies 101.
Fortunately, we've got some allies. There are some enlightened brokers here that we're going to be working with.
But it's a broker that arrived here quite a long time ago and has had a change of heart from looking at the world as a very transactional place to seeing this place as a holy place, a sacred place. We meet an enlightened one named Fareem, and Fareem needs our assistance, and in return, he leads us to Haven,
which is a hub that has been created out of progenitor ruins, and this is where the Enlightened really have made their home.
Haven serves as our foothold here, as well as use it as a base of operations and really start unlocking the mysteries of this land.
The enlightened brokers are intent on protecting and preserving the work of the first ones here, but now they're seeing Zoval bring his forces against the Automa and tear up the land, and they are eager for assistance.
The brokers themselves are very ostentatious, they're very into materialism, but the Enlightened are not that at all. They have relinquished this material way, and you'll see this reflected in their clothes. They're a little tattered, they're a little faded, because it just isn't important to them anymore. They're just here for the pursuit of knowledge.
When players arrive, they're kind of fishes out of water. And one of the first things that we have to do is start learning how to communicate with the Automa. Think of it as a kind of runic language, based in symbols.
We will bond with a small construct who's pretty cute, actually. And with his assistance and the assistance of Fareem, we will learn eventually how to understand the symbols through the cipher of the first ones.
We'll uncover different parts of this alphabet and start to learn more about the progenitors and Zereth Mortis itself.
It will allow you to unlock new and different forms of content. So that can range from daily quests to new options on the vendors to places to explore and new side quests that open up. So it's really the gateway to exploring the far reaches of Zereth Mortis.
As we looked into the development of Cypher of the first ones, we wanted something that was unique that players haven't seen before. A little bit of familiarity, but something that takes that to the next level.
We really involved the whole team in this creative process. We worked with our UI team to be able to represent those through text, through these things talking and seeing them on screen in chat bubbles and in our chat window. Little by little, these kind of runes start taking shape into words that we recognize. But it's going to be a process that unfolds over the course of playing through Eternity's End. The Automa speak in this kind of musical language. They don't talk the way that we mortals are used to speaking. The sound team was super excited. They jumped in. They started prototyping all kinds of different sounds. We listened, we gave feedback. And we really ended up in a cool place. As you're playing through and gradually unlocking the language, you'll be able to see those words that they're saying, but still hear those tones.
Raid time. Is it
The Jailer's true goal has never really been to escape the Maw or to gain power. He's been focused on reaching this place called the Sepulcher, to go into this place of power and to really rewrite the rules of the universe.
Get some info. Come on, how many bosses?
We'll learn that the Jailer has breached the Sepulcher of the first ones, and this becomes our new raid for Eternity's End. We're going to gather our forces. We're going to pursue the Jailer inside. Once you go inside the Sepulcher, there's some mind-blowing visuals. This is a place that should not be able to exist according to the laws of physics as we know them on Azeroth. Just looking out into this impossible sky of seeing these ancient works of the first ones, those laws don't apply to anything we see here.
Among the bosses that we're going to face in Sepulcher of the First Ones include the Jailer's forces, maybe a Dreadlord or two that you haven't tied up loose ends with. We'll face a Consular. This is similar to a being like Algalon, but the Jailer's gotten to it and has infused his domination magic into the Consular. Before we get to the Jailer, however, we need to get to Anduin first. Our hope is that we can learn whatever Anduin knows about domination magic. We need to be able to resist it, or better yet, fight it.
Okay, wait, hold on.
We know players have been waiting a long time for the return of tier sets, and as devs, we have too.
It's a great blend of progenitor magic, golds, and metals, along with those class-defining silhouettes. Wolves for shamans, pointy things for rogues. It's gonna look amazing.
Our class and combat team was super excited to bring class sets back. This is something that felt really right for the story. We're in the final act of the Shadowlands saga. We're here literally on the brink at Eternity's End. And what better place to fully unleash the power of these classes? And I think players will really enjoy the return of those class sets just as much as the team enjoyed making them.
Sets, that's cool, okay. We'll talk about that in a second.
How do you make something that is mystical and magical and incomprehensible and yet understandable? I think we've done a good job of finding that line.
The team as a whole has been working so hard, and we are so excited to get this out for everyone.
We're gonna get new mounts, new pets.
A bit horrifying for me, but exciting for some is the fact that, you know, some of the spider mounts can now fly. Who needs flying spiders? But that's also going to be a cool thing for people.
We have updates to professions, to soulbinds, to conduits. There's a new dancing minigame in Darkmoon Fair.
Got me.
I'm a story guy, so I'm super geeked about watching players kind of piece together those little lore tidbits. That's what excites me as well.
I'm really looking forward to Season 3 of Mythic Plus. Tazavesh is getting split into 2 dungeons. If you're a raider, if you chase Keystone Master, if you're an achievement collector, there's something for everyone to do in this.
Shadowlands is like the final chapter of one book of the Warcraft saga. And our team is already hard at work on the next stories to come. Can't talk about them quite yet, but when the time is right, we're going to be really excited to share them with you.
I called it! Along with everybody else, they ain't no 9.3, boys. Ain't no 9.3. I mean, to be fair, it's not confirmed. That's a video. All right, that's a video. That's a video. What do we think, chat? What do we think? What do we think? I think overall it looks pretty good. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot answered here. Like there wasn't as many answers and or clarification on certain things as I wanted, right? They did indeed bring back, or they mentioned tier sets, which is legit. Dude, what did they call them? They said, I want to go back to that briefly. Where are the tier sets at? Right here. Yeah, here.
And as devs, we have 2.
It's a great magic. We need to be able to resist it, or better yet, fight it.
When I saw Progenitor tier set, I'm like, oh no. This is Shards of Domination 2.0. It's gonna be one universal set again, right? But no, like the way I talk about it, it's multiple classes, right? Like
we know players have been waiting a long time for the return of tier sets, and as devs, we have 2.
It's a great blend of progenitor magic, golds, and metals, along with those class-defining silhouettes. Wolves for shamans, pointy things for rogues. It's gonna look amazing.
Our class and combat team was super excited to bring class sets back. This is something that felt really right for the story. We're in the final act of the Shadowlands saga. We're here literally on the brink of Eternity's End. And what better place to fully unleash the power of these classes? And I think players will really enjoy the return of those class sets just as much as
I was a bit worried that it was like, oh, this is one like Domination Shard set bonus or whatever all over again. But no, I don't think it is. It looks like it's gonna be like it's like called the Progenitor set, but they're all like just gonna be based around different class bonuses and effects and all that kind of stuff. That's cool. That's cool. They didn't really clarify a whole lot on the raid, how many bosses there are, no real release dates or anything. I was hoping for a bit more of like a deep dive on like double legendaries, tier sets, maybe even a little more, or like how many bosses are in the raid, things like that. It sounded like we would defeat, overcome the jailer. It sounds like, I mean, they mentioned it's the final stage, like the final saga of Shadowlands, which, I mean, we don't know technically in the end if this is the final patch, but it sounds like it. Regardless, like, it looks like a final patch. It does. You're going to what looks like 3 or 4 different new zones or subsects of zones, right? Artistically, it looks pretty cool. I like it a lot too, man. These models are pretty legit. You have to get in and play it, obviously, right? It sounds like it, though. He even mentioned they have more storylines coming up, but they can't really talk about them, right? So, alrighty. So, all that being taken into account, number one, at least to me, the new zones look awesome. When I first saw them, I thought of the Netherstorm biodome kind of look that we had way back in TBC. The raid, the brief images we had of it looked really, really cool. And dude, the jailer looks sick. The raid looks cool. The tier sets, I'm gonna be honest. So like, now there's a lot of, I guess, talk about tier sets and how they are now and things, obviously, right? I think the bigger, I guess, how these tier sets are. The big thing is that they did clarify, which we'll get to in a minute here, that tier bonuses, I guess we can just sort of start there. Tier bonuses are indeed a thing. Tier sets are returning in patch 9.2. Now, for me personally, aesthetically, I think they all look good. They just, okay, there's 2 things here. I think they all look good. If you remove sort of like, this is a warlock, this is a mage, this is a druid, for example, I can tell this is a shaman, this is a rogue, this is probably a monk. I can't tell what these 2 are very easily. Like the warlock one looks like an NPC in Bastion, right? Like they look good. It's just I don't think every single one screams rogue, druid, warlock, mage. Like this one for example, and maybe like these 2. I'm not like incredibly familiar with what they are. Apparently this is a priest and a druid and a warlock and a paladin. They all look good. I'm just saying, I think a couple could probably capture the essence of the class maybe a little bit more. I think the big thing is that for a lot of people, they're sort of tired of the, I don't know if they're tired of, but they're used to seeing the same like gold on white on like, you know, blue, sky bluish kind of color across all of Shadowlands. And let's be honest here, the second we hit Bastion, being one of our first zones in beta, we saw this on all the NPCs and everything. And like, I think this tier looks good. It just is not as suiting for each class as I would like it to be. Regardless, it's still cool. The big thing for me though is the actual bonuses, right? Now, a big thing here, unlike previous patches where, you know, people who do arenas or do Mythic Plus have had to go into the actual raid, Blizzard has indeed clarified that you are going to be able to obtain tier via raids, PvP, or Mythic Plus dungeons. Now, there were a handful of interviews that came out, and one talked a bit more about this, saying that you can get them from, they called it, I think they called it like the Great, I forgot what they called it, but it seemed like how they worded it was they drop in the raid like normal, or you have an option of selecting a token from your Great Vault if you're like a PvP or a Mythic Pluser, and you can take that token and bring it to one of the actual crafting systems, which is going to be unlocked later in the actual patch to craft tier in the new zone, thus allowing PvPers and Mythic Plusers to get access to those tier bonuses, which I think is a very, very good step in the right direction. Now, I've had to go into arenas and PvP, whatever, before, looking at 9.0, looking at 8.3, getting a Flashpoint Rolling Havoc helm that wasn't anywhere in the game except for getting, I think, 2100 in arenas, 1800, and having to do that. So I've had to go, I've seen both ends of the spectrum, and but in the long run, I think this is the best way they can make this work. They did say Mythic Plus chests at the end of the dungeon will not drop tier, so I assume if you're in the raid, you kill bosses, they can drop from the bosses in there. Otherwise, you get it from your Great Vault as an option for if you're a PvPer or a Pluser over the course of time, you're able to craft them. So a very good step in the right direction. They did also clarify in one of the interviews that they will indeed each have unique tier bonuses, looking at 2-piece, 4-piece. And they also stressed that it was going to be class like rotational changing abilities for most specs, which is really, really cool. And they'll change between specs. It's not like it's okay, I generate a shard or I cast a spell and it procs an intellect proc. No, it should be something that changes your actual rotation, which is really, really cool. That's what people like about tier bonuses, or I guess have liked for a very long time. So I'm very, very happy to see he's back. In the end, I'll probably wear tier 3 or the Mage Tower challenge mode skin anyways. But I'm very, very happy to see he's back, and having the crossover via PvP, raids, and Mythic Plus, everything, it's really, really good to see. I'm happy. I think this was generally very well received. Now, in addition to that, they also mentioned in 9.2, there is no new renown grind. They've more or less left the actual covenants behind in a sense, which they haven't. We'll get to that as far as like the main focal point of this video. One thing I want to see change, but we will not add new renown levels. It is a system linked to the progression of your covenant, and we are venturing beyond the original history, which was limited to covenants, in favor of a more global story where all come together to pursue the same goal in Eternity's End. And I have to say, this patch, looking through the overall, the pictures of the zone, how it seems like this is like a very large Argus kind of patch. There's a lot of really, really cool content. The zones look actually insane. They just look really cool. It looks really, really good. This patch screams final patch of the expansion to me. Blizz also did clarify that for the most part, Eternity's End is the final major story patch of Shadowlands, which they mentioned here a bit that they wanted to do it in, I guess, in threes, being you enter Shadowlands as like the first part of the story. Second part is, you know, the jailer like breaking out and, you know, I guess us striking back in a sense. And the third one is us going into Eternity's End and fighting him. Now, there's a bit more to that. If you want to read more into it here, I'll have links to these articles down below in the description. But TLDR, to me, this patch does indeed scream final patch of the expansion. But not having a renown grind around is really, really nice. I think for the most part, people just sort of ignored it. But the big thing is, with all covenants being swappable right now, I wouldn't really want to be grinding to 120 renown in, you know, 3 different covenants. Or I guess, well, yeah, all of them. So good to see. Very, very good to see. Moving on from there, the Sepulcher, I think, of the first one, which is the raid, has 11 bosses. But it has an interesting gating on it, which we haven't really seen, I guess, since like Sunwell Plateau, maybe a couple other bosses here and there, like, but they were like, you know, like Rodem, but they were just single gated bosses, right? A Blizzard Blue Post has gone into additional detail regarding the raid release dates and stuff, confirming that the first, however, 8 bosses up to Anduin will be available on normal and heroic difficulties when the raid opens on the second week of patch 9.2. So there's multiple things in this statement here. Number one, similar to patch 9.1, we're going to have the patch drop. Let's say week 1 of February. I have no idea. Week 1, February, the patch drops, for example, right? Week 2, normal and heroic open up, which I'm a fan of having like it open week 3. I like having that 2-week buffer when the patch drops, like get the zones flowing, start grinding a bit, and the raid drops. Regardless, we have 1 week, same as 9.1. And then the week after, when Mythic opens, well, that's week 3. So same as 9.1 essentially. Now, it was very confusing, the initial wording they put up. So a blue post clarifies here. Narratively, the Eternity's End raid tells 2 stories, one after the other. Our current plan for the release of the raid looks like this. During the first week of the release of Eternity's End, the raid will not be open. We know that. New zone, grinding it all out, same thing. Beginning with the second week, the raid will open for normal and heroic like normal, and the first 8 out of 11 fights will be available in those difficulties, with Anduin being the 8th fight, essentially the last one that's open. It will not be possible to fight the final bosses on any difficulty during week 2. This is intended to provide a moment to tell the story in a way that accounts for the passage of time between the events of the 8th encounter and subsequent encounters. Now, I assume Anduin's the final boss. They've said it's a very, very complicated, intricate kind of fight in one of the interviews and one of the websites. Once again, I'll have a link down below if we want to read more into them. I think this makes sense. I would assume Anduin helps us on boss 9, 10, 11. Maybe some Sylvanas stuff going on there. We'll see. I think this makes sense. And honestly, the way that Blizzard has... I think this is good. It's fine. It's good. And for the most part, I think everyone's been okay with it pretty much. There hasn't really been a whole lot of backlash about this. Now, and honestly, I'd say like probably 99% of guilds kill the first few bosses, 7, 8, maybe, during initial heroic week release, unless you're a Hall of Fame guild or obviously a world first guild. You know, I don't think it's going to cut down on like split runs a whole lot during week 1, but week 2, when Mythic opens, those split runs for end tier boss loot, like 10, 11, higher eye levels, and I would assume relevant gear, are going to be very, very important for world first prog, because you can't do week 1. Regardless though, beginning with the weekly reset of week 3, all bosses will be available on normal, heroic, and mythic difficulties. So there's no gating of mythic bosses. Whenever mythic is open, you could walk in there and go boss 1 to 11 in the first day. Is it going to happen? I hope not. Chances are exceptionally low. But there's no gating of mythic. It's just normal, heroic week 2, and then week 3 mythic opens, and you go from there. So honestly, I'm not against this either. People have been calling for a while. Some people have been saying remove PTR from Warcraft. Now, I'm not a big fan of that personally. I like PTR. I think it's great. I love it. I love the ray testing, all that stuff. But I would not be surprised to see Blizzard not... Okay. I think Blizzard could very well not even test the final 3 bosses on heroic, on normal, which they don't really test, or mythic, or anything on PTR. I would be surprised if they didn't. I think they probably will, but they might not. The thing is, like, if they don't do that and want to keep them surprised, like sort of, you know, keep the storyline the way that it is, which Blizzard did mention, I believe Ian in his interview said that you'll be able to see what happens with, you know, the jailer in the dungeon journal when the patch drops and stuff on PTR. Regardless, if they don't test these bosses, I'm okay with it, but they have to get the tuning right, because remember how Sylvanas testing was during the first heroic session. That boss was a mess in phase 1. In phase 2 barely worked. So they have to get the tuning right. But if they can pull that off, this could be an incredible raid and a great way to round out Shadowlands as a whole. So overall, not mad about this. Tier sets once again. Yeah, crafting stuff. They go a little more in depth in here. One of the goals is to reintroduce tier sets. Sometime after Eternity's End releases, you'll unlock a Forge of Creation system, which we saw a bit, and you earn new currency. They said it was similar to research. I get Korthia grind research. I know we're all scared about that, but you unlock the Forge and be able to create tier sets. The currency, along with items in PvP or dungeons, can be transformed into a tier set piece. This is supposed to work like a bad luck protection system, or again, for people wanting to make a new character, or as catch-up method if you're started late. So yeah, you can technically craft tier on your new ults, which is actually really cool too. We might normally have patched this much earlier or much later in the game, but we wanted to introduce these systems earlier to give players a clearer advantage or roadmap. I'm sorry. We're looking forward to getting feedback from players in the system, since it's much different the way it was before. So that's good. Easier to acquire tier. I'm all for this. It's good. So the one thing here, we talked about this already being the final patch of the expansion. For the most part, we know this. So the one big thing, and this is where what you're going to hear a lot of feedback on. This is the only thing people have been angry about or frustrated with as far as 9.2 announcement has been concerned today. Double legendary restrictions. I guess we should start here. Equipping 2 legendaries at a time, patch 9.2. They have indeed been announced. You can indeed play 2 legendaries. They are also account wide. When you unlock them, you have to unlock the 2 legendary trait, I would assume, through the table, like they're talking about, right? Seems to reveal double legendaries is coming in patch 9.2. This will allow players to equip 2 other legendaries for the final tier, but there are some things that Blizzard is still waiting for feedback on. Now, this is very important. In the interview, they said they're open to feedback. Now, this is a translation, so it's a bit off here, but we already read it. So how does the balance work of double orange legendaries? So they're talking about legendaries. How does the balance work of legendaries? Is it a random match between any 2 legendaries, or is it limited to 1+1 mode of Covenant, Orange, and Professional Orange? So Covenant, 1 Covenant and 1 non-Covenant. It is still under study. We're still waiting for feedback from various channels, but what is certain is that players need to unlock legendaries by increasing the rep of enlightened brokers in the new area. So it's a rep grind. We know it's going to be. Of course, unlocking double legendaries is the account bound. So it's account bound. So the big thing here, this said they're open to feedback. It's under study. However, in a separate interview that Ian Hazzikostas did, he did mention, yes, players will have, where's that here? Let me see. The question, is the legendary item system supposed to endure in Eternity's End? Once again, translation issues here, not a big deal. Yes, players will have access to new level tiers for legendary items. The materials required to upgrade these items no longer come from Torment, which is Torghast, but from Zereth Mortis directly. Now, they mentioned that you can also go into Torghast if you want for these materials, but you get them from the zone. So Torghast is not a requirement anymore. They'll be updating it. You can do it if you want, but let's be honest, no one's going to be in there. Cosmetics or other things will be available on Torghast, sure. So here's the big thing. In addition, with their advance in Zereth Mortis, players will have the opportunity to not only to equip the legendary item linked to their congregation. Now, this is the translation. This means Covenant, but also any other legendary simultaneously. Therefore, you'll be able to wear 2 legendary items at a time, 1 from each category at the end of your journey. Now, I'm going to say, myself and from what I've seen, many other players are very disappointed in this initial ideology of legendaries being like I'm happy with 2 legendaries, but Covenant restrictions, we're going back to beta. Covenant restrictions are not a good thing. I know they're changeable. I know you can change covenants however you want. It will now, but some covenants are a lot better than others legendary wise. Number 1, Warlock, for example. Night Fae is very good in AoE, not very good in single target. Necro Lord, good in single target. Okay in 2 target, not good besides that. Venthyr and Keyring just suck, right? Some covenant legendaries interact with covenant abilities. Some interact with actual, like class abilities, like Incinerate and Demon Bolt and Drain Soul. But limiting you to 1 covenant and 1 non-covenant is, in my opinion, a tremendous mistake. Now, it will take a lot more tuning, 100% on Blizzard's end, to get the just 2 legendaries in general, like tuning right. But I think it needs to be done. Playing for a Warlock, for example, playing Cinders and Madness, playing 2 legendaries that work simultaneously together to do one thing. Just, it's hard to put into words. Just the synergy between having 2 legendaries that do similar things with new talents and new tier sets and things like that. It's really, really cool to see. And people have wanted this since literally 9.0, right? We've had, look at Legion. We didn't have restrictions on this. We didn't have covenants, but you can play whatever you wanted, right? And when you got 2 legendaries, you ended up playing at times 2 different ones because one legendary worked well with the other one. But tier sets, it's just, or tier sets, covenant restrictions, it's just like some might work well. For example, Boomkins, I would assume, want the Pulsar legendary, or maybe even Boat with Venthyr, for example, right? And that probably works pretty well. But when you have a legendary like Warlock for Venthyr that just buffs the ability that the Venthyr have, which is garbage in the first place, and no interactions or anything else, it's really bland and boring and just disappointing, you know? It's still cool wearing 2 legendaries, but the overall take from what I've seen from basically everyone is, please Blizzard remove the 1-in-1 restriction here. I know Covenant's swappable, I get it, but still being locked into 1 legendary from that Covenant and then 1 other one, just, I think personally removes a lot of the fun. Players, WoW is best when players have multiple choices to make and classes feel rewarding and engaging. And just 2 legendary combinations in general, or 2 legendaries of no restriction, makes classes feel that way. Some classes might with covenants and some might not, but opening it up to 2 legendaries in general makes things infinitely better across the board. Yes, tuning will need to be done, I get it, but at the same time, and I don't think this is going to happen, but I would say players probably even be willing to take the patch later on, a few weeks later, if you have to tune more. It's fine. We're all here. Once again, they've said they're open to feedback, right? In both interviews here, the Ian interview, I believe the other one as well. And they've already gotten a tremendous amount of feedback on this. Besides that, everything else in 9.2 looks awesome. Tier sets returning, double legendaries, however you want to look at it. New zone looks great. Raid looks awesome. Things look really, really, really good. And 9.15 has set the stage for 9.2 to be even better. But my one concern, complaint, my plea is please remove the covenant restriction thing. Conduit energy is gone. You can swap covenants at will, please. Just let us have one final patch of the expansion where you can play whatever you want. Basically it. That's it. Double legendary combinations without any restrictions just feel infinitely better. From a Warlock perspective, I want to play Cinders and Madness. I want to play Wilfred's and Horn Nightmare. I want to play Malefic Wrath and, I don't know, Af has weird ones, but yeah. Some specs have really good legendaries that you can combine with other ones to make even better. Some don't. Putting even more arbitrary, like, you know, restrictions on that makes it even worse. So that's my one plea. 9.2 looks great. Legitimately. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. It's not copium or anything. It looks really, really cool. PCR, I assume, hits the next week or so, week or 2 weeks. We'll know more then. But the one thing is, if you want feedback, you've got it. Covenant legendary restrictions have to go. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And bring back bonus rolls. So, yeah, that about wraps it up. Thanks for watching, dudes. Like I just said, 9.2, from what they've shown, everything does truly look like a good patch to me. I mean, obviously, it all depends on how the raid is. You know, Sanctum looked really good too. And in the end, we got in there and shards weren't tuned and the raid just sort of fell over as far as Mythic's concerned and stuff. But the new zones look cool. There's things to do in game. When Korthia, even during 9.1 PTR, like Korthia was cool initially, but I said to myself, even on stream a bunch, like, I don't really know what there is to do besides like a week of Korthia and then just the raid, and there wasn't anything to do. But this patch looks to be very different. The raid looks good. You can farm tier Mythic Plus PvP. No renown grind, but it's honestly probably just better. Double legendaries, however you want to look at it. Tier sets returning. I think the brawler skill, the handful of other things too. Really, really cool changes. And 9.15 has laid the stage for 9.2 to be even better. Now, I assume PTR, like I said, hits within a week or two. We'll see where that goes. We'll probably know a lot more then. And hopefully Blizz changes their idea or ideology on double legendaries. But, you know, well, we'll see. Either way, let me know what you guys think of this, this video and all the changes and everything in the comment section down below. Any questions, drop them down there as well. I will be sure to get back to you. If you guys want to see more raw content and help support the channel, be sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons below. It helps out a ton. I also want to give one massive shout out to my patrons. Thank you a million times for all the support, guys. Really, truly do indeed appreciate it. Once again, the 9.2 Warlock PTR spreadsheet and everything will indeed be a thing. It's not yet because PTR is not up, but it will be very soon. The tier 3 rank of my Patreon or higher does indeed get early access to that. If you're interested in supporting, there should be a link somewhere up here and or down below in the video description. And to a similar extent, all the actual article links and interviews would be down there as well. With that being said, thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.